Hello everybody, UB here, and today we're going to talk about how I made my own bridesmaid's dress for a wedding that I was in just a couple of weeks ago, so let's get started. So, I was the maid of honor in my friend Twyla's wedding, and it was so much fun. I really loved getting to hang out with a group of friends that I don't really get to spend a lot of time with most of the time. Really, what I did was I took two dresses that fit the colors of Twyla's wedding, and basically neither of them fit. They weren't going to, and so what I did was I took both of them and combined them into a dress that was inspired by a design that I saw on Holy Clothing on Instagram. If you're a fan of Renaissance style things, then you should definitely follow Holy Clothing, and they aren't paying me. This isn't a sponsorship or anything, but I really enjoy their designs. So basically what I started out with was I took my seam ripper and I took all of the pieces that made these dresses out. So that started with taking the top off of the true bridesmaid style dress that I bought that had the silver beading around the neck. I took that off and I was left with just the waist down, so the very long heavy skirt. And then I also took my seam ripper and basically went down the end of the other skirt for the other dress that was a two-piece. It was like a prom style dress that had a top and a bottom, and neither of those pieces were going to fit me. Started with that, and then I went on and took the top to that prom style dress and made it into a belt that goes underbust. And it wasn't big enough to go all the way around, but that's where it already had some loops for doing some lacing in the back. So I just left those loops in there when I trimmed it down, and basically that made it so that I could lace it up in the back anyway. Now, what I basically did was I trimmed it down to the shape that I was looking for because I wanted a point down at my belly, and then I took that, put it inside out so that the seam would go on the inside, and sewed it together, and then I turned it right side out and sewed along the edge again to make it a very flat, nice, clean surface, you know. And you'll see me do that on a number of the pieces that I make in this video. After doing that, I was able to basically take the fabric from the skirt of that same two-piece dress and make a top out of it. So I actually used my tank top from Duane Made It, and I would highly suggest you go give him a subscribe or a follow or whatever. His channel is Duane Made It, and he's one of my best friends, to be honest. He is very talented and funny, and he is trying to make it as an actor in New York, but he also makes YouTube videos where he creates really mind-bending props like his Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. He made the whole car. It actually ended up on TV at one point, so please go check him out. And if you want to buy some of his merch, like the tank top that I used here, you can go to DuaneMadeIt.com and check out all of his merch. Now, what I used the tank top for was actually to kind of trace out something that would actually fit me. What I ended up running into in doing this is that the material that the tank top is made out of is a little stretchier than I really accounted for, so I made this a little bit too small, but because it had the lacing in the front in the design that I was creating, it wasn't of detriment to the design, so we just went with it. Basically, if you want to make this at home, what you can do is take a tank top that fits you really well, lay it down, trace it, and then what you need is two pieces of the same size, and they're basically going to be the same shape, except for in the front, you're going to want it to have a lower neckline than in the back. So in the back, you'll want a little scoop to leave a little room, but on the front, you'll want a larger one, and basically all I did for that was I took seamstress tape and measured out what I actually wanted, and it turned out really well. I wish I would have made this design longer on the bottom, but that's something to know for next time. I cut out the outside part of this out of the skirt on that two-piece dress like we talked about, but the inside was actually some gray fabric that I had in my stash. What I inadvertently ended up doing, because both of these are very nice fabrics and I was very careful with them, is this piece is actually reversible. So I could wear it with the gray on the outside, or I could wear it with the blue on the outside. And originally I had intended to sew this piece to the belt and skirt, but because it turned out so nice, I ended up just not doing that. But basically, you cut out those pieces, you sew them together with the right sides together. That is the main rule of putting together clothing, is making sure your right sides are together, and then you can pull them through and make them inside out, and then just do a line of stitching around the edges to make it nice and flat. And then putting together the shoulder straps was another challenge, but really you just have to stick one inside the other and pin it really well, and then take your time putting lots and lots of stitching in there. And my stitching wasn't perfect, but it sure did the job for this dress. Next, I made a white blouse to go underneath this top that I made, and this also suffered from the same issue where I made it very, very short because I thought I was gonna make a white underskirt to go underneath, and then I thought about it. It's a July wedding. Why would I put more layers onto this ensemble than I need to? So I ended up not doing that, but it also made it so that it's basically a crop top. If you're really into that, that's great. That's very much a modern kind of style. So if you want to make this at home, you totally can. I basically did the same thing with one of the old t-shirts that I sold online for a while. This one makes me feel really confident. It's a very good fit on me, and so I laid it down and traced it out. And because this top was going to be very flowy and poofy, it didn't need to be a very tight fit or a good fit. So I was able to just kind of willy-nilly trace it out with a brown pencil on some white fabric, and then sew the front and back together and gather the neck and the waist with a little bit of elastic, and then put on the sleeves. The sleeves are their own kind of beast, and I used a very specific shape. I used a very specific shape here because this is how you make what are called princess sleeves, and I learned this when I made my Rapunzel dress many, many years ago, and one of my mom's friends, Lorraine, actually taught me how to make these sleeves. The shape that I'm using that has that extra bump at the top actually gives you more fabric to gather at the top, and that makes your sleeve go poof, which is really, really fun. So we did the princess sleeve thing and then basically measured it out so that it was just straight until the wrist, and then I gathered up the wrist and made a cuff for that as well. And I didn't show a lot of that process, but it's pretty self-explanatory. There's some elastic inside of a piece of fabric, and then you just gather the end of your sleeve in that. And I think it turned out really, really well. I actually used 2 layers of fabric on the sleeves because I have one layer that's the regular like t-shirt material, and then I have one layer that's a little bit more flowy, a little bit more fantastical on top. And lastly, we basically just took the skirt from that very nice bridesmaid's dress that we tore apart at the beginning of the video, and I tried to gather it with just a very large stitch. You can do this with just about anything. You put your sewing machine to the largest stitch that it will do, and then you can take one of the threads on top and just pull, and it will gather the fabric. But the fabric in this case was so heavy that it wouldn't really hold that gather for me, so I ended up using elastic anyway. And so there was a band of elastic at my waist. The belt was sewn kind of on top of that to hide it. And then I also put an extra piece of fabric in the back to kind of hide that gather, that elastic in the back, and bring everything together. And then I was able to just tie the belt around my waist, and that's what held everything up. So you can see there were a lot of different parts to this dress, and originally it was thought to be a dress that would be all in 1 or 2 pieces, like an underdress and an overdress, but I just kind of changed it as I went. With all that being said, thank you so much for getting this far in the video. You get 1,000 experience points just for that. And thank you to my patrons. We have a couple of new ones. So we've got Mark, Nathaniel, Twyla, and Liam, and we also have Jen and Kelly. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for supporting me, and if you would like to support me as they have, you can go to patreon.com/ubdraws. Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to drink some water, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.